Romans 14. Let's talk about Romans 14 and Christians and government obedience.
Okay. See, here's my issue with well, if God just put them over you, I guess it's just your lot in life. Okay, so how does that play out if, let's say, something happens and your local world is turned up on its ear, and suddenly you find yourself in a situation where you have a local warlord that's running around stealing your children and raping your wife and cutting men's genitals off and sticking them in their mouths. Well, according to Romans 14,
just God, be in submission to the authorities.
God wants me to put up with this.
Right.
Dude,
it creates an idea that whatever the state does is sanctioned by God, but that wasn't true in the Old Testament. It wasn't true in the New Testament. Half of the Old Testament is them rebelling or doing what God told them to do in response to what a dictator or a ruler, pharaoh, whatever was doing.
Right.
Like the narrative is, and they did have to bear up under unjust suffering at times. And I believe that to an extent, in a much lesser extent right now, but that Americans are bearing up under an unjust evil system that we have allowed to overtake us.
Sure.
So the idea, like we had mentioned earlier, about being the people of God being a restraint on evil, I do believe that is a working mechanism still today in this country, and that if this country was built on Christian malcontent, and it was,
right.
Now we had some deists and stuff like that in the creation of the country, but largely the success of this country has been malcontent Christians who insisted on there being some level of morality. Even if you look at what John Adams said,
right,
that the Constitution was written for a moral and religious people, and that it is wholly inadequate for the governance of any other.
Well, here's the thing. Without the moral and just and the biblical the spiritual compass there, the bolts fly out of the hinges. Okay. Of course, a completely hedonic society needs to be ruled by a master, because they can't rule theirself. They
right.
can't say no to anything, like an idiot child, just take any typical 3-year-old that doesn't know that they can't put cat poop in their mouth. They need somebody to tell them not to put cat poop in their mouth. Well, that's no different than, to, like you said, to some degree, what we see today with, look, dude, social media full of purple-haired toddlers putting cat poop in their mouth all day. That's what our...
Yeah, metaphorically speaking.
The
Ben Stein. Metaphorically speaking, Mr. Ipkiss. Yeah, dude. And that's a good analogy, because the things that are so popular and enforced by society and corporations is as dumb as putting cat shit in your mouth.
Yes.
At this point. The reverse gender confusion, which... Okay, Milo Yiannopoulos. You know who Milo Yiannopoulos is. Okay. He was talking about this, and one of my buddies at work was also, we were having this discussion, and it just kind of clicked in my brain when he was talking about it, that like sexual confusion is one of those things that is a prelude to the destruction of a society.
Absolutely, yeah.
Historically, and it is happening here now.
Well, I mean, think about it. Even from a mammalian, just a situation. If you took the population of deer in Missouri, and all of a sudden a portion of those can't decide whether they're the correct sex or not, and you have does running around scissoring in the woods, and men running around, rubbing their wieners on each other. Okay, you would have a complete collapse of that
the population.
ecosystem.
Yeah.
The population would go to hell.
Well, and when you look at things like,
and you know what? If you saw that, you would not have Fish and Game celebrating that as inclusion and diversity. They would say, "What the hell is there a fungus on their brain?" What the hell's the matter? What happened all of a sudden? Are the planets, is something out of sync here that has these animals acting like they've got brain damage? They wouldn't be like, oh, hell, that's natural. You know, every so many years, all the deer decide that they're the other gender.
If they're being honest about science, they would find that to be an anomaly and seek to correct it.
Yeah,
it
would be more destructive than the wasting disease and hemorrhagic fever to the deer population.
Right.
And they would know that it's a problem. Just like how humans are the only animals that don't know that you're not supposed to live in constant fight or flight. Okay. Humans evidently
I think that the reason for humans being able to carve out an exception to nature is because we are spiritual beings. And I don't deny that maybe animals have that capacity. I don't know.
I don't. You know what? Here's the thing. I don't know. And here's another thing. Okay. And it goes to my point of infallible common sense being more valuable than any amount of degrees or credentials and all of this shit, because you can look at it and say what you just said, okay, and it makes perfect sense. At the same time, you have people that get off on pontificating on things that is completely immeasurable. And it's funny because I feel God laughing raucously at these people. For how fine a bead they feel like they've got on the world. They know how the puzzle pieces and Legos
generally
click
these
together.
These are the people that deny the existence of God.
Right.
A fool says in his heart that there is no God.
They're really
so it's
smart
just manifest
people.
Foolery.
Right. They're really smart people. Yes. Very
the most educated among us who know absolutely everything that isn't true is true. But the one thing that is the biggest truth of the universe is suddenly the most nebulous, deniable thing on planet Earth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I feel more sophisticated for just hearing it.
the Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world that practically worship themselves.